Hello, this is a Murakami Minute. I'm your host, Caleb James. With me, as always, Mr. Spencer Church. Today's story had some jazz elements. He talked about jazz, but not really. This one is with the Beatles in Murakami's first-person singular stories. This was the longest one we've read so far.
Yeah.
It was, 60, 70 pages or something?
Something somewhere around there.
It was interesting. What was your feelings on it?
The beginning, I was kind of just like, I was like, all right, well, where's this going? But by towards like the middle and end of it, I kind of stopped liking it.
Mm-hmm.
Though I'm not a huge music guy.
Yeah.
I know songs because I hear them on the radio, but I couldn't tell you who sings it and the name of it most of the time.
Right.
Or like, I heard that in that movie. That's always in the movies, the motion pictures. So I feel like maybe if I...
like the last one with the Charlie Parker.
Yeah.
If you were into music more. But like this one was more pop music because it was the Beatles, Rolling Stones, things like that. We'll give the brief synopsis because this was actually a fairly simplistic story. It was elderly man. I'm pretty sure this was just Murakami this time.
Yeah, don't we begin every episode like that?
Yeah, but like this one really sounded like if Murakami was just like, this happened to me, you'd be like, okay, that makes sense, because it starts off with an elderly man who's recalling his youth, and it's pretty much like, because it starts off on a kind of somber note where he's talking about how even though he technically is old, but he doesn't feel that old, like everyone around him's either dying or they're
reminding him of his age.
Yeah, they're reminding him of his age because everyone's elderly. And he was talking about a girl he saw in high school who he was immediately smitten with, and she was carrying a copy of the Beatles album or something like that.
Yeah,
something with the Beatles cover on it.
One of the albums.
It was like their first album, I think, I didn't know this, but American music was super popular. Beatles aren't American, by the way.
Yeah.
Obviously, but like American pop music and British pop music were
just
whatever.
Anything from the East, probably.
The West. Japan's the East. Land of the rising sun. Where, like, whatever...
Oh, yeah, that's right, because we're like the filthy Westerns.
Yeah. Whatever music was popular in America, though, like, their chart toppers, so at the time was the Beatles, Rolling Stones and stuff, is what was, like, really popular in Japan at the time, which is surprising because, it's English, but it makes sense.
Yeah.
They were worldwide famous, obviously. Like, with this collection, or with this story, it's more about memory, kind of like how the previous ones were, it's about memories, nostalgia, things like this. So this guy was smitten with this girl, and then it goes into him talking about his high school girlfriend that he had. It pretty much just culminates in him going to her house on a day at a time they were supposed to meet, and they're going on a date or something, but she wasn't there, but her eccentric older brother was.
Yeah.
And this guy's like real, like, I don't want to say gross, but he's
not put together.
Yeah, he's dropping food. He must have just woke up at 11 o'clock in the morning. And then he like the main character, again, no name guy, he kind of wants to leave. Like he doesn't want to be there. It's kind of awkward. He doesn't know this guy, but he invites him in, and he's like, "Hey, come on in the house, and we could wait for her to come, your girlfriend, or my sister." They have this weird conversation. He ends up reading this story, this very sad suicide story. Like the author, a famous Japanese author at the time, he wrote this story about wanting to die or something, and then as soon as he finished the last line, he killed himself. And then it seems to be a theme in this collection too, is suicide. Like the couple with the story with the Tonka poetry dealt with that too. You have that, and then this guy breaks down and tells him that he has this weird memory disorder where parts of once or twice a year he just loses huge tracts of time.
Yeah,
just doesn't know what happened, and he's worried that he's gonna accidentally somebody he doesn't like his dad or something, he's gonna bash him in the head with a hammer and kill him. But then
which right then I was waiting for the story to tell. I was like, and then I noticed the smell.
Yeah. Well, up until that point, it's just a weird situation the kid's in, high school kid, the girl's brother's 20, 21. But because the guy's memory disorder, he couldn't go to college. He's just, all he does is stay home. But like when I was reading that, I got the same impression. I was like, oh, this is going to take a dark turn, isn't it? He made him read, because he didn't want to read the story. He wanted to leave, but he just keeps trying to get up, and then he's just like, no, stay a little longer.
Like, I didn't know, like, with only reading a couple of his short stories, I didn't know, like, is this like the kind of stuff that he does? Is it like, does he do like these weird, like, kind of like twist, like turns and like kind of, just change it real quick? Like, you know what I mean? I'm not that familiar with, like,
right.
So it's just like, ooh, what's gonna happen next?
So it's kind of written in a way where you think, is this kid gonna get murdered? Because the family's just not there either. It's not like the girl who's supposed, like, she's one of those people that she said she was gonna be there at this time. She was gonna be there at that time. So the kid's already like wondering, what's going on? Why isn't she here? But then, like, the brother describes, like, oh, the dad's not home, and like the other sister's not here, and my mom's not here either, and she never leaves the house. You're just like, so as soon as I heard that, I was like, did he kill his family?
Yeah.
Because you get the impression that this kid is not put together, but then you're like, maybe he did. And then you talk about, like, again,
the memory loss.
Yeah, the memory loss, and he's talking about, like, oh, what if, like, he killed somebody when that happened? Like, when he loses the memory, he wouldn't know. And he's talking about that, like, that suicide story, how it affected him so much when the kid read it out loud. And it's just, he's making him stay there. And it was like, oh, this is bad. But then, as Murakami often does, he goes the direction that you don't expect. He just went back into the story about how it's, the memories and stuff, and it goes...
That's what we would have done.
Yeah.
Because we're lazy.
No, what Murakami did was he goes on to describe how the narrator ends up breaking up with... Like, it turned out it was just the wrong week. He got the wrong week.
Even though that he's pretty sure that he didn't.
Yeah, and like I said, it's like 70-page story, so there's a lot of talk about the Beatles and pop music. Like, that's the theme of this, besides memories, is... It's like how music can trigger memories and stuff and things like that. And then like the human connections we have. Like I think we talked about this in like one of the previous renditions here, is how people that you meet in your life can really affect you even if you don't realize it. In the instance for this one, he is like a 35-year-old man. He goes in talking about when he was like in his 30s. He met the brother again. He ran into the brother
just randomly on the street.
Yeah, in Tokyo. And this time the brother was all put together and he looked pretty normal.
But he still had like a mustard stain.
Yeah.
Just because, some things just don't die,
Yeah, that's what he said. So it was like a nice Murakami touch of like, again, the details of, okay, well, even though a person changes who they are, you can't really change who you are. So the guy's still kind of a slob, even if he doesn't want to be. But they end up having coffee together, and he asked the brother, like, hey, what happened to your sister? Turned out she died. She got married and had a couple kids and then just randomly committed suicide like a couple years previous. The narrator, he's shocked. So the story that led up to this point, you have, he's talking about like he didn't really have a connection with this girl. Like he ended up falling in love. Why they broke up is he fell in love with someone in Tokyo, which I think he ended up marrying. But
because they were like high school sweethearts.
Yeah, he had like this connection to her. So even though he didn't care for her that deeply, when he found out she committed suicide,
it still hit him hard.
Yeah, it hit him hard. And then he tries to change the subject, and he finds out the brothers right after that day that they met. The brothers, it was like a genetic disorder, so it should have got worse over the years, but instead it just went away. That's why he was able to go to college and lead a normal life. And then that was the only time the second time he met that guy, and then it was done. He never saw that guy again either. So it was just like these weird connections with these people.
And then to bring it back to the beginning, that girl that he saw in the hallway with the Beatles album, never saw that girl ever again throughout the rest of his time in high school. Never seen that chick again. Well,
I mean, in that opening, too, it talked about, like, false memory because he was talking about the way she smelled. And then he even says she probably didn't even have a fragrance.
Yeah.
Like, that was probably just something my mind created to add this allure to this figure, this person that I was so infatuated with for no real reason. And he didn't talk to her or anything. He didn't meet her really. That was pretty interesting. So that seems to be the theme of this short story collection so far, is just memories and how they can change
and the effect that people can have on you.
Yeah, like the effects that people and songs too.
Because like you figure what, in the first story with the piano, like the guy went to see that chick's recital just because they had piano class together. In the second story, the two people sleep together just because they happen to work together, and she didn't want to take the train away home. What was the third story?
The Charlie Parker story.
That one's not. I guess that one doesn't really fall into it because that guy just kind of wrote like a fake essay.
Yeah, that was a little bit different. It was just kind of going over like his editors and like different things and stuff, but
then in this story,
all the stories are connected by music, memories, and how music could bring about memories. It's almost kind of like a love letter to Murakami's favorite music.
In the the poetry one with the people having sex, how I said like what I liked about that story was the detail.
Mm-hmm.
What I liked about this story is the awkward like situation. That's something that I could see happening to me.
Yeah, like you want to leave.
Yeah, like I like that could like nothing like that happened to me, but like if something like that happened to me while I was in high school, that would have been lock in step with like
he perfectly captured the awkwardness of being a teenager in a situation like that. And like even the kid, like the brother asked him multiple times if he wants coffee. Yeah. And the kid actually really did want coffee.
Yeah, but he was like, no.
But he just like, no, because one, it was just awkward. And two, he didn't want to impose, like he was raised not to impose. Yeah. And he just didn't want to be there. He wanted to leave. Yeah. And he didn't even want to come in, but he just felt like he had to.
This was one of the stories where like in the previous where we said, so you don't feel like a real Japanese kind of like this one. You felt more of like just because of how the families were raised, and the brother was asking him like stuff about his sister because like I really don't know my sister.
Yeah.
Like, and then he was just kind of like, well, I kind of don't know her either. So it's just like these two guys who
our only connection is this girl that's not even in the picture right now.
That neither of them really.
And then they reunite randomly. In, what was it, like 20 years in the future? And same thing. The girl's not in the picture, but that's their only connection. And they both still said they didn't know much about her.
Yeah.
Like the guy was, like the brother was lamenting that he wished he could have did something to help her so she didn't commit suicide. But
she had no signs. She didn't leave any notes. I forget but the way she died.
Sleeping pills. She collected them.
So it was a post, like, she meant to do it. It wasn't like an accident or anything like that.
Because this also had themes of change and how things still stay the same, which like we alluded, we talked about the brother staying short, like, even though he changed his life, he's still the same slob, kind of. So you just have that throughout so far too, is how things change, but they do always kind of stay the same. I think that's interesting. And like the nostalgia aspects, because like this narrator doesn't like the Beatles really. Like he listened to it because it was Beatlemania and it was on the radio.
He knows all the songs and like all the lyrics because it was just playing all the time.
Yeah, so his nostalgia in this wasn't even about the Beatles. It was just how the Beatles connected him to the world at the time. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, and then too, because it's like the guy as an adult, he's happy as well. Like he has the wife from the girl that he met in Tokyo. I think they have a couple kids. But even though that he's having this this good life, whenever he gets the news of like basically, his first love committed suicide, it still, has
it's jarring.
Yeah, it still has this effect on him, which I think is a very human thing.
Well, how many times in our lives have we heard somebody we might have went to school with that we didn't actually know? Like, we weren't friends with or anything, but we just knew the name. Maybe they were in a class with us or something. Yeah. And then you find out they died, and you're like, ah, shit, man. Like, that's been happening more and more over the years. Like, you find out somebody...
Especially with our class?
Yeah, you just, like, somebody that you just knew of. Yeah. You didn't even know, but it still hit you in a weird way, because it's almost like, it could have been me, or could it have been me? Like, I'm the same age as that person. Yeah. Same upbringing, kind of, like, very similar things. And, so, like, those are things you start thinking about. So far... Unlike most Murakami works I've had, there's not been any real tragedy in this.
No.
There hasn't been any, like, extreme sadness or anything. No. But we started touching upon it with the suicide of this lady in this story, so I'm wondering if we're going to be hitting...
But, no, life-altering, things that you normally... when you think of a story that need to happen.
So I'm wondering if this is going to start picking up, though, into more... Because Murakami always has some kind of big tragedy or sad... And there's always people, like... I don't know if I've read a Murakami work where... a person hasn't died or died a horrible death or something that just deeply, like, there's always deep sadness or deep sorrow with, like, a character. So we haven't had that really yet, but I think it's coming.
Yeah.
Unless this was his happy book. I mean, it hasn't been, like, joyous, but nothing bad's really happened.
It's very, and I'm sure we mentioned it before, it's very slice of life.
Yeah.
It's a weird slice, but it's a slice of life.
These stories haven't gotten real weird yet. Now we got the monkey story coming up.
Yes, yeah.
So that's something. But so far, these are all just things that could really happen. And like this story, like I feel like this was just Murakami reflecting on his teenage years.
Yeah.
And maybe he did falsify some of the, he's a writer. He created, maybe that brother character doesn't actually exist, but.
Because the narrator, he's a writer, right?
Yeah, he's a writer.
So.
Yeah, everything just sounded like Murakami. The guy loved jazz and classical music. He was pretty much just, I think, Murakami, but maybe Hunter S. Thompson added elements that weren't actually involved in his life. It might not happen. Maybe they're just things he fantasized about, because we all, as teenagers, fantasize about different scenarios that happen. Most of us still do that if we're not stupid, if we're actually creative people. Because I wonder, are there people out there who just don't have those wild fantasies? Or even like the murder fantasies when you're on the road and somebody cut you off and then you go home and stew on it. And it's like, what if I just found that guy's house? And like, you just think of bad things.
Like if you could read their mind, it's just white noise.
Yeah. Just like because I feel like I've talked to people where it's just like, oh, this person doesn't actually create scenarios in their head. They don't think of things. They don't even have an inner monologue. Yeah. They're just, what you see is what you're getting. That would be such a tragic life.
But maybe not, because it seems like a lot of those people are happy.
Ignorance is bliss.
Yes.
I don't think we have to dive too much more into that story. Like I said, it was actually a pretty basic story. Again, though, like the whole middle chunk of that was mostly just about the Beatles and stuff. I didn't go into that because it's not really that interesting to know. Like if you're reading it, it kind of is, but just to like talk about it's not really.
He was like, he was just like listing the songs on each side of the record.
Yeah, and things like that.
And stuff like, and this came after this, but then we listened to that when we did the,
Mm-hmm. I'm looking forward to the monkey story. I do hope it's not seeming like there's going to be too much of a weird story, but the monkey's on the cover of the book is what I'm saying. I'm thinking the monkey story is where it's going to...
The monkey's talking, right?
Is it a talking monkey? I hope it is. It's got to be a talking monkey.
Like, isn't it like in the title? Isn't it like something like, isn't it like the talking monkey something?
The title of the next story is Confessions of a Shinagawa Monkey. So it's this monkey's diary, maybe. And then we have a weird carnival story. And then we have a poetry collection. Anyway, thank you for listening. This has been a Murakami Minute. Ja, 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 ja.